Welcome to Inside the Itinerary. We are here with Beth Rowan, owner of Tapestry Travel, to talk about Portugal. Let's jump right in. Beth, tell us about Portugal. Let's start with the common mistakes that travel advisors make when planning trips to Portugal for their clients.
I think one of the most common mistakes is not really understanding all of Portugal. Portugal is very small. It's, I think, a little bit bigger than New Jersey. But, there's like a classic itinerary that everybody automatically does. So it's the Lisbon, Porto, Algarve itinerary. And I think one of the biggest mistakes is not really understanding that the true authentic bones of Portugal reside outside of those areas. Right. So Porto and Lisbon, they have that sort of layer of those two cities have been dealing with tourism. So there's a little bit of the culture feeds the tourism sometimes instead of the tourism impacts it, I guess. And then the Algarve has very, very long been. It originally was a big tourist spot for the Germans and Brits and people like that. That was their summer vacation. But now it's a huge expat community. So there's pieces of culture that are lost in that classic itinerary. So, for instance, if you go from Porto north towards the Spanish border, there's places like Braga and Guerves they're just so authentic. They are, you go through these towns and you have the fishmonger's wife and she's got her dress and her apron on and she's pushing her cart with the fish that her husband caught that morning and chanting out and somebody yells from two stories up and they barter back and forth and then they lower a bucket with the money. She takes out the money, puts the fish back in, and they send it back up. You're not going to find that in Porto. You're not going to find that in Lisbon. So to me, to really feel the essence, you have to go outside of those places. There's the north of Porto is incredible. The Alentejo region, which is that center part, is incredible. And if you want beaches, they're not warm water, but the beaches on the Atlantic side of Portugal are uncrowded, unspoiled, and drop dead gorgeous. So, yeah, long-winded way of saying look outside the box for your clients. Offer some things that they haven't seen on Instagram.
So let's say someone has 10 days. What does an ideal 10-day itinerary look like?
So, so if you're coming from the States, more often than not, you're going to fly into Lisbon. There's just more lift into Lisbon than there is to Porto. So fly into to Lisbon, but then I recommend you immediately go north. So you can either catch a quick flight up there, you can catch a train to Porto, or you can hire a car and driver. Right, and the car and driver is great because you can stop at a couple of places like Coimbra on the way and see that. But then go and do Porto. Porto's another fantastic city, a lot of culture there. There's a lot of really fun things on both sides of the river. And of course, the Douro Valley is, I recommend sort of having a day in the Douro Valley. Do one where you're either driving or like on e-bikes, and then have some afternoon on the water. Sample lots of good wine. But then take 2 or 3 days and go north, even if it's only as far north as Braga. So I would go north. The landscape begins to change. It gets there's a national park up there that if you drive through it, you feel like you're almost in Switzerland. So just do some of the north. Then you come back to Porto. To drive from Porto to the Algarve, the Portuguese are always like, no, 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 you have to split it up. It's a 5 hour drive. For most Americans, 5 hours is very doable in a day. So I recommend picking up a rental car, driving down to the Algarve so that you have a car down in the Algarve. Another mistake I think people do is they don't advise to have a rental car in that area. Just spend a couple of days in the Algarve. You can have a nice, relaxing day, at a beach or by the pool, and then have a day where you go and see all those incredible cliff landscapes and visit some of the little towns. And then from the Algarve, head up to Lisbon. And then either coming from Porto to the Algarve or the Algarve back up to Lisbon, those are one of those two legs. I would put some time in Alentejo. So Alentejo, that's where all their cork trees are, a lot of their wine production is. And again, totally different kind of food. So yeah, I mean, 10 days is a great amount in Portugal. And then you have some time in Lisbon and then you head out.
Are there any splurges that, regardless of budget, people should definitely make room for to do?
Um, there's so many things. I don't know about splurges. There's so many things in Portugal to do. I that aren't super, super expensive. They've got the sidecar tours in Lisbon and Porto, which are totally fun. If you really want to splurge, stay at a wine estate on up in Douro before you head out of Porto. Um, yeah, I would. For me, probably the biggest splurge would be have a driver, right? The roads are fine and they're good, but to have a driver, you also get some historical and cultural context as they're taking you around.
And best and worst times to go?
So it's they get about 300 and some odd days of sunshine a year, so it's pretty nice weather. Um, of course, shoulder season is great. I've been there as early as March, a little bit. It's like, sort of like our weather. I'm located in DC. I think you're up in Jersey. It's sort of like our weather, right? A little bit more rain in March. I love the shoulder seasons. I think September, October are probably the best times to go. The water's really warm, but you still have nice weather and you don't have quite the number of tourists. Um, I personally think that one of the worst times to go is in August because that's when you have a flood of tourism that's coming from the European continent. So it's not just, US and Canadian, it's also, Brits and Germans coming down.
Are there any regions that you or your clients have just found underwhelming?
Well, again, this is all from my perspective and some of my clients' perspectives. For me, the region is the Algarve. Because of the expat population, I think it's changed over the years. There's, bigger buildings, some resort style properties. The landscapes are beautiful, and the Mediterranean water is beautiful. Um, but I think the beaches, so Portugal as a whole, when they started to have these expat communities develop in the Algarve, Portugal was not in the financial position. They viewed it as something very good for their economy. So they sort of didn't have as many tight controls on, construction and things like that. They learned that lesson very quickly, so they have clamped down on the Atlantic coast. So Lisbon North, Lisbon South, all of those stretches of the Atlantic coast, no high buildings, no buildings can be built on the water. It's just everything, it's just very, very tightly controlled. So what you have is these beautiful deserted beaches. The best surfing beach in the entire world is in this region, Navarre. Um, and you have all these quaint little towns that just still feel very authentic. The water, it is the Atlantic Ocean, and there's nothing between the Atlantic Ocean and between Portugal and the US. So it's the first of the Atlantic Ocean. So the water does tend to be strong and cold. So it's if people want to really spend the day at the beach in the water, the Algarve is better. But if people like me, they just like being on the beach, seeing the water, going in the water isn't as important. That's the stretch that I would go to, either north or south. Places like Comporta are just, they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. And there's no crowds because they don't have the kind of infrastructure that will ever allow crowds there.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about things that are just must includes when you talk to your clients. What things do you encourage them to definitely include?
Yeah, so there's a couple of big ones. So there on a little about 45 minutes by train or by car outside of Lisbon on a little peninsula is uh, Sintra. So a lot of people do know Sintra. It's a very iconic picture. Everything's painted these beautiful colors, and there's palaces there. That's you could do it as a day trip outside of Lisbon, but it's a must see. It's really a highlight for a lot of people to go to Sintra, and you can. Advisors can delight and surprise their clients with a lovely picnic. There's a couple of garden spots that a good DMC or tour operator can help you to set up a surprise picnic for them. If they have a little bit of time, I do recommend possibly doing an overnight in Sintra. The reason for that is day tripping is probably 85% of how everybody goes there. So that 5 o'clock comes, everybody's going back to Lisbon. You get Sintra to yourself. And it's really lovely. It's really, really lovely. So if you can squeeze that in overnight there, and also make sure that they add a town called Cascais. So that's a little seaside village. I went there years ago when it was really just all fishermen. It's a little bit different now, but that's also a real add-on. So I would definitely do that. Um, Up in Porto, get advance tickets to go to the library. It's completely escaping my memory right now, but it's the one. J.K. Rowling lived in Porto for a while, and it's said that this bookstore is it's the architecture inside is incredible with this grand staircase, and she used it for some of Hogwarts in her book. But it's also one of the coolest bookstore. I'm a bookstore junkie, so it's one of the coolest ones I've ever been to. Not just because of the tie-in to Harry Potter. So that I would definitely do. Also, so Porto, everybody thinks it's one big city. It's split in the river. One side is Porto, one side is the Gaia side. The Gaia side is where all of the port industry was. So that's where you're going to find the tasting rooms and the restaurants and things. Make sure that they do get over there for a day because it's just the history and everything is pretty interesting. The tasting rooms are wonderful. The food over there is wonderful. And there's a super fun place called the Pink Palace. And the Pink Palace is, if people like rosé, it is a tasting experience that, and it's not just because you're drinking wine, but it will make every adult feel like they're 6 years old again. It's so much fun. So I would definitely do that. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think.
Talk to me about the music.
Oh yeah. So Fado is the traditional Portuguese music. So I think it's best listened to in Lisbon. It is a very soulful, mournful kind of music. We don't have anything like it here in the States, but it is beautiful and it is unique only to Portugal. And some people are like, I'm not really into that, especially if they listen to a clip. I'm not into it. Really encourage your clients to do a night of fado when they're in Lisbon. It is, people always come back and thank me. I've never had somebody been disappointed. And oftentimes it turns out to be one of their favorite experiences in the entire country.
And it's best in Lisbon.
I think it's best in Lisbon. Yes.
Okay. Beth, I want to ask about the islands. We talked about it very briefly before. Can you expand upon that?
Uh, I can. So the Azores are actually, and there are seasonal direct flights from the east coast of the US to the Azores, and it's just a little bit over 5.5 hours. So it takes me less time to get to the Azores than it does to get to LA from where I am in DC. Um, but the Azores, so imagine you're sailing across the Atlantic and you can't see any land anywhere, and all of a sudden these islands come up. They are volcanic islands. There's 9 of them altogether. Most of them go to one major one, São Miguel. Um, the it's very different than Portugal, right? Because they are islands, they're volcanic. Um, you're not going to find the cobblestone streets, but you are going to find if you have people that are nature lovers, especially somebody who lives mid, Chicago line down over the East Coast. If they're looking at they want to go to something that has a little bit more culture, a little bit more interesting, not just beaches. Recommend the Azores. There are thermal springs everywhere. There are hiking. There's whale migrations, kayaking. It's very outdoorsy. So if you have somebody that really wants cobblestone streets and culture, That's not the place, but it is a very standalone destination for somebody who wants to go someplace entirely different and they love the outdoors. And
What's
speaking, oh, go ahead.
what's the recommended number of days for that?
You can, I mean, I recommend 7 to 8 days only because you do 4 days on the western side of the island, 4 days on the eastern side, but you can shorten that up a little bit. It's such a quick, direct flight. You can shorten it if you wanted to do 6 or 7 days. And a must see, and if need be, I'll send you some information, Andy, but a must see when you're in São Miguel is there is a goat farmer there who does a breakfast, and everybody looks at me and says, "Why do I want to go have breakfast with goats?" It is always the number one thing. Always, always the number one thing. Oh, and then Madeira. Madeira is a little different. It is um, so it's a larger island. It is has more culture to it because of that. It's been settled longer. Still has a lot of outdoor. There's a lot of hiking, thermal pools, things like that. But it's very well known for all of its celebrations. It's always having a festival. I think it's right around now that they're doing their big Festival of the Flowers, which is actually you have to book almost a year in advance to get a hotel room during that time. But if you want that mix of outdoors and culture, then go to Madeira.
Great. And when you say now, for those watching this video, now means the end of April.
Correct.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
April.
Right. Well, Beth, this was awesome. Thank you so much. You shared a lot of amazing information. If anybody wants to learn more, you can contact Beth or contact myself. Beth, until next time, thank you so much and happy and safe travels, everyone.